Board games, board games, it's what we're talking about. Board games, I'm not gonna shout. I am starting off this streaming with a little bit of singing, and during today's show, it is meant for us to talk about tournaments. I am talking with someone who's not stupid. I'm sorry, I couldn't think of a better rhyme. Their name is David, and I'm going to now end the song because I'm running out of things to sing along. We're going to talk about tournaments and how you might be attracted to these things and how they might be benefited and good or bad or whatever. Board games and tournaments, it's what we're talking about. Board games and tournaments. I'm not going to shout. Hey, good morning.
Morning, Bez.
And hello, Xate. It is lovely to see you. And yes, I am Bez, as you've heard. This is bedtime in New Zealand. We are blethering about board games, and so it is the busy bedtime board game blether. And coming up today, we are going to talk about the joy of competition with David Brown. I thought, like, we've not really talked about the playing of the games and organized play at all, which is quite remiss of me because this is episode 184, and so it talks about the design of the games, you know, the marketing of the games. But once it's out in the world, maybe people don't just want to play it with their family. Maybe don't just want to play it with their friends casually. Maybe they want to compete. And that's where you get into tournaments. So why do people want a tournament? What goes into making a good tournament? Let's talk about that in 5 minutes or 10 minutes or so. First of all, let's talk about brilliant things. Brilliant things. What's the little thing which is brilliant? Here's where you see watches.
Oh, sorry. So yeah, watches. I like watches, and I've got quite a collection of watches. But I've just inherited a watch from my grandfather, and which is really good because it was something he bought. He saved up for. He bought, and he wore it a lot. And then my dad's worn it. And I've recently inherited it from my mum, so that's off being serviced at the moment, so that I can wear it as well.
Other than being heirlooms, that can be a bit of jewelry and be, you know, something that has all these wonderful memories. I mean, of course, there is a utilitarian value in watches as well. You've got one on your wrist if you would care to demonstrate it for us. There you go. And why do you wear a watch? Why not just use your mobile phone?
I think a part of it is convenience, and part of it is just I've worn a watch since I was, I don't know, 10 or 11 or something, I suppose, and you just get used to it, and it is a lot more convenient to just look down and see what the time is. I mean, this is a clever one as well. This is a smartwatch, so it although it's an analog watch, it does link to my phone and ping me when I get a message or something like that. So it's a sort of a hybrid one, but it still looks like a normal analog watch, which I quite like.
And it does say not all phones have the time on because some people don't have the smartphones. That's very true. And but even in this day, as David says, maybe you just want to keep wearing it because of tradition. Maybe you just want to glance down. And hello, Jess. It is lovely to see you. And I hope that you're both well. But hopefully, you know, I don't personally wear watches, so I'm not going to. I did have one not too long ago, but the strap broke, and I was like, you know what? I don't even use it that often. I've got my phone always on me. If I need to tell the time, it's not that long to take it out. I do have a clock in the living room, a clock in the hall, so that's what we need to do. Oh my gosh. And that sounds terrible. By the way, in case you don't know, David, Mayo is Jess's cat, so not an
This
actual
sounds like a
human.
good name for a cat. Yeah, I like that.
But yeah, watches. If you enjoy wearing a watch, then more power to you. And awesome. So let's move on to the questionably quick questions. Here's where I encourage everyone to share your sillier questions for David, and I might answer them myself if you haven't heard the answer from me yet. But let's start off with the basics. Where exactly are you, and what time is it?
So it's 10 o'clock in the morning, and I'm between Milton Keynes and Northampton and Bedford, sort of in the middle of that triangle. So what's that for those people outside of the UK? About 60, 70 miles north of London.
Almost close enough to cycle in a day, you could say.
Yeah, you could cycle there in a day.
Yeah, so what are three of your favourite board games and why? And by board games, I mean any tabletop games.
Well, board games and tabletop games. There we go. There's a whole discussion in itself. So just sticking to board games, I like some of the simpler games. So I like Carcassonne and Ticket to Ride and those sort of games that you can play with anybody. You know, you can just you can play with friends who aren't gamers. And then for something that's perhaps a little bit more complicated, I've recently played Terraforming Mars, and I really enjoyed that. And that which is a lot more complicated game. There's a local group that play board games. We have been in the past up to now been meeting sort of once a month, and that's a good way of meeting people and just trying out some different games, or bring in some games that you want people to have a go at that perhaps you don't have time to play.
And when you say up until now, I assume you mean that in 2020 it had to close down, and they are hopefully going to resume.
Yes.
Fingers crossed next year.
Yes.
Do you play a lot of board games with your family?
No. Well, yes and no. My wife doesn't play. My wife has absolutely no interest in games. But she plays Monopoly, which we don't count as a game. So, but my two sons who are grown up, when we can, which isn't that often, but we do enjoy a good game, and I've introduced them to some games, and we do play games occasionally, and we keep promising ourselves another another gaming day. Christmas sometimes is the usual time.
And if you get together, I don't know if you're hoping to get the family all together this Christmas.
Well, we'll see what happens, but yes, I mean they both live fairly locally, so it's not a big problem. It's just restrictions.
When you get together, what game would you imagine maybe pulling out on Boxing Day or whenever?
Well, a game we keep promising to play that we haven't played for many years is a game called Killer Bunnies.
And the Quest for the Magic Carrot.
Absolutely, yes. Which we used to play. We haven't played for I don't know, donkey's years, but we started playing that, and that was one of the first games that I then started buying expansions for, because we were playing it, and then you'd add on another layer and another layer and another layer, and that's my first game like that, where you bought an expansion and expanded the game as you played it more.
I mean, that is a ridiculous game. There's so much chaos and randomness, and it's got that really interesting mechanism at the end, which is so divisive, where for those who don't know, you're basically not accumulating victory points or money or anything. You're basically accumulating lottery tickets. And so I might have 20 and someone else might have 1. And then that's basically a lottery for, do you actually win? So the person with 1 has 1 in however many chance of winning. I've got to 20 in however many chance in winning, and still I might lose. And so it's randomness upon randomness.
I think it's a game where you're playing for the joy of playing, and the winning is by the by, really, because as you say, it can be totally random.
Jess asks if you are playing any games about kittens or cats.
Well, apart from the, am I playing anything with kittens? I do have a crew to build for Malifaux. So they brought out a what they call they weird, bring out what they call a nightmare crew every year, which is a totally crazy theme or unusual theme of a existing crew, and they brought one out, which is the cat herder, and it's an alternative to Hamlin. So Hamlin has his rats, and I can't remember what they renamed the master, but she has loads and loads and loads of cats, and they are tiny. They're this sort of size, and I just haven't got around to building that crew yet. But yeah, so there is a cat crew possibility in Malifaux.
Now, for those who don't know Malifaux, the somewhat popular miniatures skirmish game, I guess you could call it. Yeah. How would you describe it in a minute?
So it's a steampunk themed game. So set early 20th century from a timeline point of view, but with an alternative universe idea that you travel through a through what they call a breach through to this alternative world. So it gives you a very broad theme for things like settings. So you've got Victorian type towns, you've got Bayou, you've got frontier towns, like Wild West frontier towns, crazy themed areas, and then obviously you've got slum. The town is then the sort of the posh end, and the slum end, the quarantine zone. So that's the sort of setting for it. So it's that sort of technology.
Completely crazy and larger than life.
Yeah, and it's got sort of the equivalent of magic is what's called soul stones. So a source of magic gathered from the dead, which is it's a bit of strange things, but yeah, and then you can people can power these power machines or power like resurrectionists can use them to bring people back to life and that sort of stuff.
And so you've got these wee miniatures, and so for those who don't know what a skirmish game is, it's a low number of models. It's not like Warhammer where you've got potentially hundreds of miniatures. It's typically, I want to say, it's been a while since I played it, but it's about 8.
Yeah, about 8 players, eight models. Yeah, 6 to 10 models, depending on the power of the models. But having a mix, not just having a load of powerful models doesn't really work, because you need it's a very much a achievements game, in that you need to achieve certain things on multiple turns to be able to win. It's not a straight win or loss. You're gathering points throughout the game.
Yeah, it definitely feels a little bit more involved than those straight up kill everyone sorts of games. I mean, it does still, if you kill everyone, then you're going to be able to do your achievements a lot
Not
easier.
necessarily. You can wipe your opponent out and lose.
Really?
Because if you've not accrued the points, or you've not, if a point is associated with killing a certain model in a certain way, or in certain conditions, and you fail to do that, then you don't get the points. So it is not as simple as kill. You've really got to think about the points conditions, and that's where one of the learning points for people is actually getting their head around. It's not just walk across the board and kill people. Sometimes actually not killing somebody and positioning yourself or doing something else is what will earn you the points. And actually going, we all get tempted by, there's I can go and kill that big monster over there, and realize you've moved yourself out of position, or you've done something stupid.
Now, of course, as people might be realizing, it is a very bloodthirsty game. One other interesting thing about it is how each character has these little cards which have quite a bit of rules going on for each character. Were you about to show one of them?
You got that right. All right, say that. So it's a two-sided card. Oh, let's get it the right way around. I'm not used to doing this. So on the front, you've got abilities and the sort of stats of health and movement and things like that, attack, defense. Then on the back, you've got actions that they can do. So some of them are attack actions. So this character here called Lelu, who's like a little demon, has got claws, so he can attack you in combat. But also it can heal itself through removing corpse markers, and there's cards. It can draw cards. So this is the other what a unique feature about this, and one thing that's a big selling point is the fact that you don't use any dice. You use a card deck, which they call a fate deck, which is basically just a poker deck with fancy suits and things. But yeah,
but it means that you're not going to get all sixes on a d6 throughout one game while the other person gets all ones. There's going to be more even distribution of that randomness. There's a lot of mitigation of randomness. It's a lot of nice elements, but we're not here just to talk about things. And Jess made a really lovely thing. Sometimes it's better to not kill someone. That's the case in some other games and also in life. And hopefully in life, people aren't. I would agree. Please don't just go and kill people.
The bias is probably more the other way in real life. Hopefully,
yes. Please do not kill people in life. That's not what we're. And Jess went to a steampunk. Jess went to a steampunk wedding once, and Xates had a steampunk wedding. So yeah.
Well, so I've got some of my friends who met playing Malifaux had a steampunk wedding.
Wow,
and that was
quite a complex game for a wedding game.
Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, the two were they weren't playing at the wedding.
Okay,
they met playing Malifaux. They met through playing Malifaux, and the wedding was a steampunk wedding.
Yeah, that makes sense. Would you like to talk about your role? Your job. We don't need to talk about this for the whole show. Just to get some idea of who you are. What does this mean? An engineering cost manager.
Okay, so I'm an engineer by profession. I trained as an engineer and worked as a design engineer in the automotive industry, and then I've worked through various different functions in the business, and I've ended up within cost. So my current role is to understand and challenge the cost of a vehicle. So how much does it actually cost to manufacture? And then I then work closely with the profit team, who then work out whether we make a profit or not.
Wow. So you kind of need to know, it's like you need to have that background in engineering to understand, okay, what's exactly needed and how can we almost save the costs, and can we do this in a cheaper way? I guess there's a little bit of that.
There's a little bit of that, but my background's engineering. One of the ladies that works for me has a finance background, and the other comes from a sort of a mix of finance and engineering. So it's combining those elements and the ability to look at numbers, understand them, and be able to understand where to challenge. So we some of it is benchmarking. We look at similar products and compare them and go, why is this one more expensive? But we're not looking at the actual cost of a part.
A quick hello and boarding to Small Robots. Lovely to have you in the chat. We're just doing some questionably quick questions before we get to the main topic. Now, it occurs to me that this is almost exactly like making a board game, because when you're doing that cost, this is the kind of work that goes into production of anything. I don't want to be overly reductionist about it, but for sure, I know someone whose entire job is to just work out the costs of the production and negotiate things with people and try to get better costs, so that they've done some work for Scrabble and other big names, and they've done some work for some games that you probably wouldn't have heard of. But yeah, it's amazing how much of a factor that is, the negotiating, the okay, how can we cut some costs and all that production
Yeah.
aspect.
The basic principle is the same. It applies to everything. I just happen to apply it to cars, but I can see it's interesting seeing. So obviously, there's a lot of discussions about the cost of the hobby, and people don't understand quite often what it actually means when they're asking their local store to give them a big discount. You know, because I can go and buy this product online cheaper than you're selling it, but you know, the store's got to be able to sell it. They've got to make a profit. They've got to cover all the costs that people don't really think about. And it's not just the cost of the product itself, it's all the other costs of running a store, running a business, employing people, you know, and people don't always appreciate that.
So, Sate wants to ask about how we know each other. And like, this is a very short answer. Basically, this is the first time we've ever actually talked. But Chris Winterburn put us in touch and said, hey, this is a person who would be great to talk about tournaments. And I said, hey, David, would you be willing to come on to this show? David said yes, and that's basically it. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, not really. No, I'd never heard of you before Chris got in contact. So.
And so if you want to know a wee bit more on the YouTube channel, there is like a bit more about David, but hopefully, yeah, we'll give a wee... Now, going back to your childhood, like you've talked about you were playing with toy soldiers and like got into war games, right? As a child?
Yes, so I obviously played toy soldiers, as a lot of kids did, but then I probably wargaming as a something to do probably mid-teens at school. And I can't remember exactly how we got into this, but we used to play with very small planes, so about this big, you know, sort of World War II aircraft, and which meant they were easy to carry. So we used to play. We used to have a really long lunchtime at the school I went to, and so we could get a game in at lunchtime on a desktop, and that's how I started. That was my first proper wargaming, and I recently discovered the rules for that hidden away when I was sorting something else out. So I've still got the rules for which I haven't looked at. But that was air war games, and then when I went to university, I really stopped. There was a gaming group there that played board games, but I didn't really gel with that group, and ended up doing other stuff. And then I got back into war games when my children decided they wanted to play 40k. So that sort of drew me back into the hobby, and it's gone from painting up a couple of models just to encourage them to play to you know, 8,000 point 40k armies and the like.
And what attracted you to Malifaux specifically? Because this is your main game, your lifestyle game, you could say.
Yeah. So I discovered skirmish games through my local independent store, a game called Confrontation. So I'd been playing 40k and Warhammer, these big combat games, and a couple of guys came in, or a couple actually came in and demonstrated this game called Confrontation, which we tried out and went, yeah, really liked it, and started playing that, and then discovered other skirmish games, got involved with doing demos, and I was running some demos at the Colours show in Newbury in 2009, and the guy I was demoing for was one of the was a distributor for games, and he'd got this new gaming called Malifaux, and so I went home with a couple of crews and some and a rule book, and yeah, it's been all downhill since there.
And how did you decide to start running these tournaments? So you started off at clubs, then at shows, and now you're running the biggest, helping run the biggest tournaments in the world.
Yeah, so I got into, I mean, tournaments for we had local tournaments with 40k, you know, just local store, you know, tournaments, local players, And although I did go to some other ones, which maybe we'll talk about later, I never really felt the need to run them. But one of the good things about Confrontation, apart from the game itself, was the community, and it was this broader community, this countrywide community that came together to play tournaments, and it was quite a good tournament game, and it had a ranking system, and we were looking for people to run tournaments, so I ran a tournament and ran 2 or 3 probably locally. So I started attending tournaments on a broader scale, but also then started to run them, which we were, you're talking quite small tournaments, relatively speaking, and it was really more or less the same group playing, just in different locations, with a few pluses and minuses, but that was where we sort of started playing tournaments and running tournaments, and then you start running them for other games. And Malifaux, we started off with 8-player store tournaments, and now we're at 80 plus 100, getting towards 100 for things like the UK Nationals, which would have been next weekend.
Let's not dwell on that too much.
Oh, sure.
No. I
don't want to dwell on it either, to be honest.
But it sounds like you continue doing it because you love the activity, and we can get into exactly why you enjoy running these tournaments later on. I want to go back to some quick questions to wrap up the questionably quick questions, after some questions that were definitely not quick. But when did you wake up today?
About 8:30.
Okay. Do you have breakfast?
Of course.
What
Toasted
did you
muffins. Toasted muffins and coffee.
Oh, anything on the muffins, like bits of cheese or butter, or
butter?
Okay, so quite plain. Are you a person do you like exotic tastes, or do you like the simpler tastes?
A bit of both, I guess. I mean, I've travelled quite a lot through work, so you get to try some strange stuff around the world. So most of which is okay.
Would you prefer iced coffee or hot tea?
Iced coffee, because I don't really like tea.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know.
And I thought you were English. When you're playing a game, do you normally eat or drink anything?
Yes, especially tournament play. I mean, it's important to keep hydrated, so I've usually got water or some sort of drink with me, but I don't tend to eat so much during the game. But yeah, you got to keep yourself fed, especially when you're playing. If you're playing 3 or 4 games in a day, so it's something we do, take into account when we're trying to run events, is to make sure that we remind people to bring drinks, or that we've got drinks available.
And if it's an all-day thing, then you need to have a break to actually eat some sort of lunch, because I know that snacks at the table, especially if it's a table full of expensive terrain, can be problematic. But
that's right. I once had somebody spill beer all over my terrain, so that was I'm very aware of that one. Yeah, they didn't get my vote for best player of the day, by the way.
Okay, I want to ask you, cards or cubes? And just for clarity, cubes includes dice.
Cards.
Would you prefer a wooden meeple or a plastic figurine?
Sorry, a wooden meeple. Oh, sorry, plastic figurine. Yeah, definitely.
And do you have a favorite localist board game shop?
Yes, I use a shop called Wargames Workshop in Milton Keynes, and he's been in various locations. Guy called Carl, but this was the first independent store really that I discovered.
Nice. And the final question. Oh, hello, Lumjacker. Lovely to have you in chat. And Jess wants to know why plastic figurines and not wooden meeples.
Oh, just a character, and part of my interest in the hobby is the painting side, the modelling side, and it plastic over metal or resin. It's easier to work with.
Really? Okay. I assumed that you would be all about the resin or metal.
No, metal's okay. I know there's some people who swear by metal and hate plastic, but I'm afraid I prefer the plastic. It's easier to work with, and paint stays on it.
Wow, strong words. So the final question from me is going to be: would you rather have 5 games that you can play forever, but you have to choose these 5 games, and that's all sorts of tabletop games, including Malifaux or whatever? Or would you rather play every game, but only once more for the rest of your life, if you know what I mean? So you can only play any given game once.
I'll stick to my 5 games, I think.
Okay. Now, in the comments, Xate is envisioning David on a runway covered in board game parts doing the model walk, wielding a paintbrush.
You don't want to be imagining that.
Yeah. So now let's get into the main topic, which is, of course, sorry about this. The joy of competition with David Brown. And feel free to... Oh, wait. I've totally missed out. Recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights. Recent highlights, playing games and other delights. Recent highlights. So quickly, before we move on to the actual main topic, what are some of your recent highlights, if you have any, for the past week?
Well, I actually got a game in last week, which is Walking Dead All Out War, which is somewhere between between a board game and a miniatures game, because it uses miniatures, but the mechanics are a lot more board game like. So I've played a couple of games of that recently, and I'm just painting up some figures for that. But yeah, my there's not much actual physical gaming going on. I've got a game on tomorrow night, and then that'll be it for another month, I guess.
That does sound... I mean, we have to treasure these moments when we can find them. I personally had a bit of an extended lie down, I'm going to call it, yesterday, listening to First Turn podcast, which I listened to a whole bunch of these episodes where they basically talk about games the first time that they play them. So they kind of talk about the game. They say, hey, would you actually take this off a shelf? Let me kind of go over it. This is how you play. And they don't go through all the rules recorded, but then they say, okay, this is the overview of the game. Now let's play it. And then they kind of teach it and play it off camera. And then they come back and say, okay, we've just finished playing it. This is who won. This is how the game went. Now, what did we think? Would we actually play it again? And it's all about those first reactions. And of course, first time you play a game can be very different to the 10th time you play a game. And I would almost say that there's something sad about this consumerist nature of wanting to churn for all these games, when part of the joy of the game is that the variability that they can offer so much loveliness on subsequent plays. But this is just to say, hey, life is too short to play everything a second or third time, but let's talk about what we choose to devote our time to. And it was quite nice listening to this podcast, learning about these people's personalities, if you know what I mean. So that was a recent highlight for me. And if anyone in the comments wants to share anything, feel free to. And as we go forward, feel free to comment, ask questions, follow. And now we are properly into the main topic. So let's start off with a bit of a definition. So what are we talking about? If you have a to me, a tournament is when multiple games are being played and then there's some overall winner. And I'm almost going to talk about it very broadly. So if you have 4 people in the pub and you say, okay, I want to have this tournament, but only 4 people turn up, to me, and then you end up playing 4 different games. And then you elect, okay, there's the winner between us. I think, to me, that would still be a tournament. What do you think? What's the smallest that it can be and still be a tournament?
Yeah, four's difficult to call it a tournament, I guess, but yeah, it is feasible. Probably 8. So you've called this the joy of competition, but for me, it's about tournaments, and tournament and competition to me are different. Because a tournament implies, to me, people getting together, whereas a competition you can do remotely. And the tournament is not just about the competitive element. So I'm not generally a massive competitive player. I play to win. Everybody hopefully plays to win. But if I don't win, that's not usually a big problem. I've travelled extensively to go and play games, and really it's the meeting people and the playing the game, but it's also the social aspect of these events. And what's really good about the sort of Malifaux scene, which then came as an expansion from playing, as I say, Confrontation earlier on, is we've built up a community that we meet up at tournaments, and then tournament can be highly competitive. So something like the UK Nationals is a very, very competitive event at the top end, but because we use the Swiss pairing system, so that you're playing people in a similar level. So once after a couple of rounds, you're playing people of a similar level. So if you're just there for the crack, or just you're not that experienced a player, after a couple of games you're going to be playing people of a similar level. And especially with a 2-day event where you're playing 5, 6, 7 games, that's even more true. So yeah, for tournaments for me are certainly a way to find who's the best player on the day or at the weekend, but also to have a good time. It's a social and sociable activity, and even people are chatting at lunchtime, chatting before an event in the car park beforehand. That's really nice to see people getting out of their cars and having a chat before they come into the venue.
I think you are possibly right that I did mistitle this, and so apologies for that, and apologies for anyone who started this episode thinking that it was going to be really all about the competition. But this is fascinating to hear about the social appeal, that it is about the bringing together of people. And that leads me to ask about, if you know Friday Night Magic, which is Magic the Gathering, they've got, okay, with a pre-release, when there's a new set coming up and there is a tournament, I mean, is that what we're talking about? Where, yeah, you pay your money, you get some cards, you try to make a deck out of it. Even, there's a fair bit of randomness there. They don't even try that hard to work out who's the best player, because if they were actually doing that, then it would probably be a draft structure rather than sealed deck, if you know what I mean, where you just open the boosters and there's a bit more variance. But yeah, it feels like it's about this shared moment that everyone's engaging with this game, and it's this expectation that this game is going to be the focus, as opposed to casual play where it might be the conversation. Is that essentially what distinguishes it?
Yes, I think so. It depends. I think it depends very much on the game. I've had sort of good experience and bad experiences at tournaments, and one of the reasons I keep playing Malifaux is the community, You don't play to the death, no, Jess. That's what keeps it going, I think, and it also, because of that, then it draws new players in, I think. So players are encouraged to turn up. So I think people have a conception which may be correct in certain scenarios where it's all about the competition, it's all about winning. And yeah, people want to win. There are some really good players out there, but my aim is always to give those guys a good game. Do what I can against them. Occasionally, you'll beat them. More often than not, the top players are going to beat me because they're better players than me, and I've got better tactics. But also, I know that those top players, I know a lot of the top players, if they're playing somebody who's new to the game, they'll probably still beat them, but they'll beat them, if you like, in a nice way. So they'll explain what they're doing rather than just going in and just wiping them off the table. They will explain, they'll allow takebacks because they're good enough to win, and but they want their opponent to have a good time, as good as you can do when you lose, obviously. But and I think one of the things I say to new players who I'm trying to encourage to go to events is go along and go for the experience and to improve the way that you play. You're not going to go to the first tournament and win loads of games. If you can win a game, your target is 1 game out of 3. And that'll probably might well be your 3rd game because you've got better at playing. You're playing somebody of a similar level, etc. Because the chances are you could be drawn against the number 1 ranked player in the country first game, but he's not going to stump on you. He will almost definitely beat you. Although occasionally a new player can come up with some totally different way of playing or an approach or a very strange crew mix that can put him off and he can do quite well. But to me, tournaments is about improving your play by playing different people and seeing, one of the problems with playing in your local meta is you'll see the same people, you'll see the same crews being played in the same way. Whereas if you go to a tournament and you'll face a particular master that perhaps you've seen half a dozen times because your mate plays it, and somebody will have taken a slightly different crew or played them in a slightly different way, and that's good for your gaming experience and your improving the way that you play, because there are lots of variations on what you can play and the way that you play each of those crews.
And so, there is the question. I mean, obviously, you could have theoretically the social aspect by just having a big gaming day and saying, okay, we're going to get together and playing a whole bunch of Malifaux for, an entire weekend. And we're just going to be playing this and we're going to try out new things. And to be fair, the Swiss style structure where, okay, those with more wins play against those other people with more wins. For those who don't know, that's basically what it means, that get more wins, play against other people who've also got more wins. Fundamentally, that's a bit of a simplification. But that is going to, for sure, improve the gaming experience. But the notion of, most of these tournaments do have some sorts of prize attached, and the competition is a little bit more severe. Unless you're totally certain that you're going to beat someone, you're generally not going to allow them takesy backsies. Sure, you might not. If you are the best player in the UK and you're playing against a newbie, I'm sure that in that example, that player is going to be a little bit more gentle, explain what they're doing, but yeah, if it's at all even, if it's like, okay, I'm 90% certain I'm going to win, but hey, you made a mistake. No, you can't do that, takes you back, say. But why would people do this rather than the friendly game? Wanting to improve your skills, wanting to really engage with the game, seeing these new strategies which might not be employed by the people that you see every single day. And obviously, going outside your typical social circle, that social aspect is part of it. But why would you choose to do it rather than just a big friendly gaming weekend?
Well, we've tried lots of different things. So at one end, I've been involved with more like a casual gaming weekend with some structure or without some structure, and that could be good fun, and that is very much on the social aspect. But they've tended to be less structured, and so you don't perhaps get as much gaming in as you would like if that's what you're going for. The good compromise that we've had, and that works quite well with Malifaux and other games as well, especially the skirmish games, is what we call like a story-based weekend. So I know that some games have like campaign games, so something like Boroughs and Badges. You can run that as a campaign, and you can run that over a weekend, and that would be brilliant because you've got progression of characters over a campaign. The story encounter uses the same format as a normal Malifaux tournament or a normal tournament event, but you're playing different strategies and schemes. You're playing against a theme, and the winners and losers, and also the pairings can work in lots of different ways. And so we've had some very successful story encounters over the years, Halloween themed ones. I'm trying to think. Christmas themed ones is obviously a popular one. So you can have more of a random element in the gaming, because it's not just about the games. It's about having the experience and getting into the theme of the game. So you see that development through say 3 games. Normally it's just a one day. So
and how have those gone?
They've gone very well in that they run really well, but there's not enough interest in them compared to the tournaments to run more than a couple of years. So most people, if you give them the choice of, right, we're going to run a tournament or a story encounter, they'll go for the tournament. And that could be just that's the way the community works, and the fact that it is this very friendly community, and we're perhaps not at that really competitive edge for that perhaps are in other gaming systems. Whereas the story encounters have run quite well. They do take a lot more effort because you've got to design scenarios, and you've got to come up with the theme and the way that it's going to work, and the way that the games link together. I was going to run one that was it was going to be a Guy Fawkes style, blow up the Houses of Parliament or blow up the guild headquarters from a Malifaux point of view theme over 3 games, and I'd got this all planned, and then it didn't happen for various reasons a few years ago, and it's still there in the back of my head that I will do it one day. But the amount of preparation and organization that you do for that, and if you're only going to do it for 8 players, it's slightly disproportionate to running a 32 player or 40 odd player event in terms of the audience you're going to hit. So I think there's definitely a place for it, and I think certain games, especially if they've got a campaign system built into them, that's a slightly different theme and will work really well.
It sounds like there's just not as much demand, at least in the Malifaux setting. Taking a step back, we do have this question: can you list the games that are played at tournaments? I guess the classics, Chess Go, etc., and CCGs such as Magic the Gathering, Pokemon. PS, I'd never heard of Malifaux. And I'm going to answer this by saying, no, we can't, because pretty much everything is played in a tournament style. Like, not literally everything, but once something gets to a certain degree of popularity,
Right.
It's natural at a certain point. And maybe it's worth talking about the advantages from the point of view of the publisher, because there is Settlers of Catan tournament, Pandemic tournament, a Carcassonne tournament. If you go to the Mind Sports Olympiad, there's all sorts of games. There's tournaments for Hive and all sorts of abstract strategy games and diving chess. I don't know if you know that one where you okay.
I've heard of it, yeah.
And I ran tournaments for In a Bind, which is now known as Yogi, and I obviously this is an incredibly silly game, but the people who are there, I said, okay, this is going to be actually fairly serious, and it was, except for I think 2 people. We had maybe 15 people who'd played it before, and people were, okay, we're going to go for it. We're going to really loosen up, because I don't know if you know this game of mine. It's basically all about contortion and stuff. And so people were limbering up and, really pushing their body limits, and it was exciting to see. But yeah, do you have any thing in reply to this comment?
Yeah, I think there are tournaments for lots of games, and also they vary between the highly competitive, and I think some of the games have quite big prize funds. I think maybe Magic is that. I'm not familiar with. I don't play Magic, but I've heard that there's some games where people will just drop out if they don't win the first couple of games, and we're definitely trying to avoid that with I think it's probably less so in the miniature gaming, but I've heard it happen in America, and I think some of it is it's the way that you approach the game. If you're approaching the game to win the tournament, and you're not going to win the tournament, and that's what floats your boat, then great, that's fine for you. But you're giving other people a disservice, I think, because if somebody's expecting to play you, and you go, well, I can't be bothered with this game. I've lost a couple of games now, and some of my worst games with people are, well, I'm not going to win. I'm not winning the tournament. We'll just have a mess about game, and then it's not a game, and it's less enjoyable because you're not playing with the right mindset.
I mean, it seems to me that maybe a tournament is a way to align motivations, because for those who I've talked about it a couple of times before, but just to clarify, Mark Rosewaters talked about their vision of the psychographics, which is Timmy, Tammy, Jenny, and Spike, and like Timmy is like all about just the visceral experience, just the big moves, instilling chaos and socializing with their friends. And if that's what you want to do, then maybe a tournament isn't for you. Now, Jenny is basically about sorts of expressing themselves. That's what they're all about. They're all about, maybe it's painting those models, or maybe it's like doing a clever little maneuver that other people wouldn't have thought of. But for them, winning isn't the most important thing. It's not about maximizing the chances of winning. And then you've got Spike, who is about winning. And, you've got the Bartel psychographics, which is primarily based in multi-user dungeons back in the day, but people apply it. But again, all of these are a bit simplified, but you can think about, are you there to just interact and explore? Are you there to dominate? Are you there to dominate over the world? Or are you there, which doesn't really exist in other spaces necessarily, but it does in multi-user dungeons? Or are you there to dominate over other players? Are you there to explore the game world and just kind of try out things and see what happens? Or are you there to socialize and you're there for the chin wagging? And it's aligning these expectations to say, hey, we are here to try and make moves that optimize our chance of success. And trying to, yeah, do our utmost. And so would you agree with that, that part of the appeal of the tournaments is to say, hey, this is the crowd, we are all playing for the same reason, we're all playing because we want to make our best decisions possible and try and dominate over other people. It's not that we have the glee, but it's like we're all about improving our skills. And do you get what I mean?
Yes, I understand what you mean. I think it's different for everybody, even within a particular group of people, whether that's local or national. People will go to an event with different expectations and different requirements, and some people, I know some people who want to win, and will, do everything to win. I know some people who get really competitive and then hate themselves because they're being so competitive. I don't know people who've dropped out of playing because they felt the competitiveness was overcoming their enjoyment of the game. And there's people who just turn up. Some people want to come and show their modelling abilities. So one of the advantages of miniature gaming is the miniatures themselves. And unless you're using pre-painted miniatures, which aren't so prevalent, you've got the visual aspect. So to me, the visual aspect of the game is really important to play on a good looking board with nice terrain that looks appropriate, with some painted models. And then you can then appreciate some of the fantastic painting out there. And so we tend to run, one of the other things that happens at a tournament is we'll have a painting competition. So a single model or a theme or a crew, depending on the preference of the organizer and the size of the event. And so, you could be the worst player in the world, but have the best painted crew and still, get some kudos from the event. And just, I do encourage people to put models into painting competitions, because what you think is, yeah, that's all right, other people may really like it. It may not be the best technically painted model in the world, but if it's got an appeal, if it's got a theme, if it's just catches the eye, then that can win a prize, and that's really good to see. So it's not always the best technically painted model that wins the competition. It's because we always do it by player vote. It's often the one that just catches the eye, and just people just go, wow, that's amazing. And then quite often you'll end up with 3-way draws. So,
and yeah, back a wee while back, Alan was asking if there's money involved in most competitions and tournaments. And this is something that I was going to get to myself. Like, how important is that prize even?
It's quite interesting. There was once I think it was actually done as a joke that somebody said, "Oh yeah, we wouldn't, somebody's willing to put up a big prize for the tournament," and the almost universal response was, "I'm not going to the tournament because it's not about the money, and it's not even about the prizes." So when we first started running, we're talking about Malifaux tournaments as my experience. Then we would you generate some money because you're charging people to play. You've got to pay for the event. So we would generally, this is back before cheap custom prizes that you can now get, but we used to get some certificates printed off, and then we'd get some prizes. You'd either buy some prizes, or we'd are quite good at providing prize packs, and there's a system for that. And so first prize
being the publisher of Malifaux.
We'd been the manufacturer, the publisher. So first prize, first person who won would get the biggest prize, and so on down, and then perhaps a random prize which would just be raffled off to anybody that had turned up. And the feedback, it was actually the feedback from the players, was those ones who were winning were, hang on, I've already won one of these. Can we do something different? And so generally now the first place gets a certificate or a small trophy or something, and the prizes are randomly given out through raffle. So quite often it's just you've turned up, you get a raffle ticket. we draw the prizes at the end. After for some of the, if we're running a tournament for charity, for example, then we'll sell tickets for the raffle and distribute the prizes that way. It depends very much on where you've got the prizes from. Some companies who donate put specific requirements on the prizes, so must go to best painted or must go to first place or this sort of thing. But generally, we can distribute the prize fund as we like. And therefore you can go to an event and come away with a really cool prize, even if you did really badly from a playing point of view. You can still have a good experience from that point of view. You can come away with a limited edition model or something like that.
It is my experience that most tournaments do not have a cash prize, I would say. I would say that something like the Mind Sports Olympiad, I think they have a proper trophy. I think that for the pandemic tournament, if you win, I know someone who won in Alexandra Palace in London, and as parts of that prize, they were basically given a trip to go to Essen Spiel, where they participated in the World Tournament. So the prize for a local tournament might be that you get some costs covered for going to the big tournaments, which is quite a big deal, depending on where you're getting to go. And obviously the bigger companies are able to afford places where at a certain point it becomes, wow, this is an amazing journey, where Magic the Gathering, yes, there are big cash prizes, and there are people whose entire career, literally, their job is just, they are a pro player, that is their job, they are just playing the game, and there are, I want to say, definitely hundreds of thousands of dollars, possibly millions, like over the course of each year, that are being given away by Magic the Gathering, and they do that in a sense because they want to have an aspirational thing where they want to say, oh yeah, look, just like basketball has a pro thing, we've got a pro thing, and they want to have those people so that people can enjoy watching it also, because it provides content for themselves. It's basically marketing, and that is why the company does it. Like, talking about myself, I do want to say that I used to run a tournament every physical convention that I went to. I'm probably still going to do that. Every ticketed convention that I go to, at 2 p.m, there's likely to be a tournament. Now, obviously that doesn't quite apply when it's free entry, but if I say, okay, you're here anyway, there's going to be a thing at 2 p.m. at my stand. Normally, I'm at the place where I would typically get 2, maybe 3 tables of people, even at a smaller convention, gathering to play one of these silly games, and they know it's only going to be like 40 minutes an hour, but because the game lasts maybe like 5-10 minutes, then everyone plays this one game about like 10 times or so, and everyone's like really into it. We establish a winner, and I used to have the winner being given all of my games. So you got a copy of literally everything. Now, I realized middle of last year that this was too much, because it started to foster an unhealthy atmosphere, if you know what I mean. So bear in mind that I am continuing to publish more and more games. So I had to start when I was like, hey, here's a tournament. You're going to get basically like 3 decks of cards. Okay, that's like a fair thing. Okay, you come in, maybe I teach you the game at the time. Okay, some people are trying it, and then you might actually win a thing. And then when it's, okay, you might win 5 games, and then at a certain point, it became like more than 100 quid's worth of stuff, which is kind of the point at which people started to engage in behavior that I didn't necessarily want to see. So at London, last year, September 2019, there was a couple, and one of them said, so this is a highly interactive take that game, multiplayer, and someone saying, hey, I'm going to donate all my cards to this partner, like a real life partner, not an in-game partner. And that means that I lose the game, but they win the game. So that means that we take all the prizes home.
Mm.
And I was like, okay, you know what? It was a silly game anyway. It is meant to be. And then no one got too upset over that. That was fine. But then at Essen 2019, on the Sunday, I want to say, someone came on like Friday, they tried to play. On Saturday, they came again. They didn't quite manage to get anything. And then on Sunday, they came and they were like so intent on winning everything that so on Sunday it was like a game categorical that involved a little bit of shouting and like shouting out things, and they were almost shouting in a argumentative way. It wasn't like good sport. It wasn't a good atmosphere, and I felt really bad because the person who got second place, I could see that they were almost retreating, thinking, oh my gosh, I'm being shouted at and I'm not enjoying this. Why did I join this? And I feel really bad. And that's why if I were to ever do anything like that again, like straight after Essen, like every convention afterwards, it wasn't like second place got almost as much as first place, and it was far flatter distribution curve, if you know what I mean. So now what I would do is, okay, first place, you get to pick a couple of things. Second place, you pick a thing. Third place, and even like, depending on how many people are there, if there's 12 people, I'll give a thing to the first like 4 people and then I'll stop, because that kind of feels like, okay, we had a final table, and then and Alan says a tournament should really require entrants to know the rules beforehand, surely. Which I mentioned that I was having what I would still call a tournament, because some of those people knew the rules and they were coming specifically for that. Some of the people were me saying, hey, this is going to start. If you like the style of game, if you want to play in a competitive manner, go and play it. But over the course of playing 10 games, you do learn it. Some people do become more able to make strategic decisions. But do you think that that disqualifies something from being a tournament if you don't know the rules beforehand?
No, I think what you've described, I've seen it used at shows and conventions, and if it's a simple to pick up, quick game, there's no problem. As you say, after the second game, you know what you're doing. That's not, if it was a more complex game, then you couldn't do that, and you need to understand the basics at least. So one of the concerns in tournament play is speed of playing. So being able to get through the game in the time available is an important factor, especially where you're playing a game where you score points each turn, and you've got a limited number of turns. So people who slow play because they don't know the rules, or people who slow play because they think that's an advantage or that's the way they play, whatever, that can be a problem. And that's actually quite difficult to manage as a tournament organizer, to get somebody to play quicker. And I've suffered from that as a tournament organizer, with people saying, oh, this guy's playing really slowly. I've suffered it as a player playing against somebody who admitted he was a slow player and then brought out a crew that he'd never played before. And you're just going, sorry, mate, you're a dick, but, that you're not winning any friends doing that. If you're genuinely slow, I've got one of my local players, he's partially sighted, so he plays quite slowly. He struggles to move stuff around the table, and we end up, sometimes moving stuff for him. And he gets around that in other ways. He's a fun guy to play. So you don't mind playing it, and as long as that's understood at the start of the game, then generally it's not causing any problems. But there's people who are playing, who can be playing at a slightly higher level. I'm not talking about any of the regular players, but you do get occasional players who are. Some players are known for being play. I'm not the fastest player in the world. I'd recognise that.
Analysis paralysis is a genuine thing, and sometimes it's not even analysis paralysis. It's just the board complexity might be a little bit more than I'm used to, and obviously Magic the Gathering or most tournaments, they've got a strict. It depends on the way the tournaments run. I mean, tournaments can be run in all sorts of ways, and we'll get into this for sure. But having a specific, okay, you need to run this many games makes a bit of sense. And for me, when I'm doing like even Kitty Cataclysm, I say, okay, we'll divide people into different tables. And the way I try to encourage fast play is to say, at a certain point, you're going to swap tables, but you will get points for every game that you've played. So if you're fast enough as a group that you've managed to play 3 games rather than 2, then you'll have 3 chances to get points rather than 2. And I have a point structure that for the points, it's 1 point for last, 2 points for second last, and so forth. But then the winner's points are doubled. So in a 4-person table, it would be 8, 3, 2, 1. That's the way it kind of works for that particular game, because it's but we talked about the prizes, but what other resources do you need to run tournaments? Do you need anything? Like, is it basically all about the fan base?
Yeah, it can be. It depends. So for the basics is you need somewhere to play. So that can be a store. Generally, you're playing a store. Nationals, we hire a venue. You've then got to make sure you've got enough space. You've got the actual playing area itself, and the terrain that goes on the table. So there's generally a mat or a mart table, and then terrain. And stores will provide that. Some players will bring along terrain, and I've got a massive pile of terrain, so I don't tend to have to worry about that. You need we run the tournament on we use a web-based tournament management system called Bag of Tools, which a couple of the guys up in the Scottish Meta developed, and he's absolutely brilliant. So I tend to run it on a laptop, but you can run it on a tablet. I can run it on my phone if I have to. It allows pre-registration. It tracks the scores. It tracks what faction you're playing, and it will work out the draw for you and the results and everything. And also players can enter their results in themselves as well, because you can log in to it. You need to consider things like we were talking about, drinks and snacks and food, and you need to take that into account. You need to make sure that in your schedule you've got time for breaks between games, and also sort of a lunch break, and also think about where you are relative to where people can get some lunch. Because if you're playing, so if I play at my local store, it's next to a Tesco's, so lunch isn't a problem. If I'm playing at the village hall that I rent for one of my events, you're in the middle of nowhere, apart from the fact you're next to a pub. So encouraging people to bring their own food, although people have disappeared but out to the pub for lunch. Does the venue provide snacks? Does the venue provide food? Some venues include lunch in their entry price, so quite often you're being limited by the venue itself, and they can be good or bad, and sometimes you can opt in and sometimes you can't. So obviously the prizes are a resource, so we're quite lucky in that we'd have a support system for those people who are what we call henchmen. So they've got a scheme for supporting people who run events, but also you can apply to them outside of that, certainly for the bigger events. But also I approach various companies, especially for the bigger events or for charity events. I will approach companies and see whether they will donate prizes. Obviously the entry fee can be used to buy prizes. Some of the events also have swag, so some sort of commemorative item, which can be anything from like a 30mm counter through to fate decks and custom fate decks and things for the bigger events. So a lot depends on the size of the event and how much the tournament organizer wants to put into it. Obviously, the bigger events generate enough money to cover some more interesting things. You know, you've got to cover all your costs. And one of the things that I encourage for those tournament organizers who are coming into the game new and expanding their pool of resource is to make it clear, I'm running this event, some of that money is going to go to me buying some more terrain or you know, some mats to play on, because that's enhancing the gaming experience. And certainly I've done that in the past.
So yeah, there's a lot to consider. Obviously, as you see, there's the space, there's the tables. In some games, you might have people bringing over their own copies of the game. I mean, yeah, in a CCG, it might be that you bring your own deck. Even if it's a CCG, maybe you need those booster packs. Maybe it's a sealed deck type thing. In Pandemic, you're expecting that all to be provided. You might want to even think about, spacing wise, having table numbers to make sure that people get to the correct table. Organizational things. I mean, for me, I don't know if I think it's through the wall, but I've got this whiteboard which is so useful for when I'm running something that I can just write down everyone's name on it at the start and just do little tallies with numbers of points and whatnot. And whenever and I get my running a stand volunteers to kind of watch over people, I think that's something that you definitely need. People who understand the game well enough to watch over, make sure there's no rules mistakes made. And yeah, having the people, obviously not just to watch it, but the people to play. I mean, that's almost like the most important thing. You talked about the timing, like maybe you do want some sort of clock system. Like, you've got to think about these things, because at some point timing is going to be an issue. Like, how do you sort that out? Do you say, okay, at this certain point in time you have one more turn and that's it? And
so we run to a time schedule, so 2 hours or 2 hours 15 or 2 hours 30 for a game. Generally we'll call out either time taken or time remaining about every half an hour, and then it'll be written into the rules pack and shouted out, you know, last turn. So, you know, don't start another turn. If possible, we'll project a clock. So certainly some of the bigger venues have got the ability to project a clock on the wall. So people have got no excuse for not, you know, knowing how long they've got. And then that certainly eliminated some of the, I thought I'd got longer than that. But going around and shouting at people is good fun during a game.
And so you need all these things. I mean, the question that Alan asked a wee bit ago was, are there any thoughts on which games tend to have a nice mix of genders and ages at their tournaments? Because I think
in terms of players?
Yeah.
I don't know, because I tend to play a very limited number of tournaments. We do have a reasonable mix, I would say, representative of the player base. So we've got 3 or 4 regular female players who actually some of those are some of the top players actually. We've obviously got there's quite a few couples as well, which is nice to see. It's difficult to see. I think miniature gaming tends to be very male orientated. And one of the things with Malifaux, because Malifaux has quite a lot of female characters and female leaders of crews, and I think that's certainly my experience at doing demos at shows has been that's attracted couples, because they can both see something they can relate to, but also it's certainly a bit more balanced than certain games which tend to be male orientated. And then ages, well, you've got old guys like me, and you've got younger players. Probably we've got guys coming with their sons, probably from mid-teens. So unless we've got a restriction on the venue, one or two venues have some restrictions on, then that's encouraged. And some of the lads have gone on to do very well. I mean, my youngest son, who plays miniature games, who's now 30, just coming up to 30. I mean, he's been playing war games since he was about 10 or 11, and he's been going to tournaments since, mid-teens. And has a good time. He's a good player.
So it seems like it's almost undeniable that there is a gender bias in board gaming generally, and even more so in, well, when I say board gaming, I mean, yeah, I'm counting miniatures as part of that, but even more so in tabletop miniatures gaming, there's a gender bias. And I think that the tournaments don't necessarily, it's going to reflect the bias of the players, let's say. And so, that's
it reflects. It's a reflection of the community. It's a reflection of the community. And I'm not sure there's that much you can do about that at an individual game level. I think that there's a lot of stores that are encouraging sort of female players, and they recognise that there is a very male bias to what's going on in the store generally. And so I think probably, I don't know whether you see a better mix within card games, or certainly within the board games. The group that I play board games with is very much more 50-50 or a 60-40 split. A lot of couples, and I know there's lots of couples where they both play. I don't know anywhere the girl plays but the boy doesn't.
I mean, there's definitely some, but I think that in order to make it more welcoming, it's just like a general attitude check, like to say, let's not make sexist jokes. Basically, this just isn't cool, even if, no matter who's around the table. And there is a talk of, I'm going to buy this, I hope my wife doesn't find out. That can feel quite alienating. It can feel like, okay, that this is the way it must be, that the husband buys games and secretly, and then there's the battle axe wife who's saying, oh, don't spend that money on your game.
I understand. I understand what you're saying. There
is a bit of a damaging thing, but beyond that, for sure, an exploration of that might be beyond the scope of this particular conversation.
Yeah, it's a difficult one to discuss within this environment. I don't know why it's that way. I think it's it's come from a very male exclusive, wargaming in itself, I think it has come from this sort of the toy soldiers side of it, which is a boy thing, and it's probably come from there. And once you get to some games that have got more general interest, and it's not just about we were talking before about it's all about the killing people, to games where it's about using your resources, using your intelligence, having a tactical approach and a strategy to win a game, then you're probably going to get more even mix of age and gender.
Alan suggests that, as we said, it's about the community of the game, and so therefore maybe a word game such as Scrabble would have a pretty even mix. I think that's, fair. For sure, if you go to something like Bridge, there's probably more likely to be a fairly even mix. And it is going to depend on the game for sure. But, I mean, again, all I'm going to do is reiterate my earlier statement in case it wasn't clear for anyone who happens to be listening, that even if it is literally an all boys club, that everyone in the club is presenting themselves as male and identifies as male, that doesn't mean that you can, still try to check in with yourself. Don't make jokes that are likely to alienate people because even if you've got some homogeneity within you, if you are celebrating, a joke that's othering people of different races or different genders or whatever, it's then going to alienate, and that celebration of that homogeneity seems wrong. And I'm not saying that homogeneity is necessarily an issue and needs to be and represents a deep-seated problem, because that's not necessarily always the case. But if you then turn it into an environment where someone coming in would feel unwelcome for whatever reason, then, and if someone does come in who's clearly different, if you're all white dudes and then there's this black woman who comes in, please, don't stare or say, oh, it's good to see a black woman in here. Because frankly, I've been in this situation where people have said, oh, it's great to see someone who, and then you feel this big responsibility, like you are representing your race or your gender. Do you know what I mean?
I have to say that apart from a mistake on my behalf of calling somebody he instead of she, which I quickly corrected, and I'm actually get on very well and are good friends with Pi now, a Swedish lady. Then I think that certainly the community that I'm familiar with is very even. I'm not aware of any issues, and we have got quite a mixed membership, if you like. It's not really membership because you're not a member, but you know what I mean. The group itself has quite a broad attendance. Sorry, I'm not very right with the words necessarily, but you get the picture. And I'm not aware of any issues around that. We've had issues around other things to do with the game, and they get addressed, but not from that aspect.
And it does seem like again, the prize structure that you have is going to affect the sorts of people that you attract, because for sure, if you have $100,000 on the line for a single tournament, that is going to possibly encourage cheating. It's more likely to happen at that sort of place than in a place where people, sure, it might be an exclusive promo card, but if what you get is basically just one card that looks a little bit different, then people are hopefully still going to go there primarily for the friendly atmosphere and the joy of the activity rather than being all about the prizes.
Yeah, and I think going away from the big prize being what you win. I mean, for the UK nationals, the prize was actually like a wrestling belt that Weird provided, which is actually really nice. It's a proper big sort of style wrestling belt, which last year ended up in Spain. And the prize pool, I ended up with enough prizes that everybody got something. It may have been something quite small, but basically it was just run like almost like a tombola than a raffle. Is that everybody got a raffle ticket? We did a draw up on the stage during a game, and then people just came up and collected the prize with their number on it. So therefore, somebody went away with quite a nice limited edition crew set, and other people went away with a couple of bits of plastic maybe, but that takes away that element of I'm entering the competition to win a big prize. If you're entering to take the kudos of the winning top place, you can see just about that's my only first place certificate is up there up on the wall. And I had a fun time getting there. Still friends with the guy that I beat in the last game of that. But it doesn't happen very often. But normally it's you're going away with a little bit of plastic, engraved plastic, or a little trophy or something as your first prize. And then there's also a rankings system. UK and quite a few of the other countries use a ranking system. So a lot of the kudos is I'm top in the rankings, or I'm the guild player or the best Neverboard player in the rankings, and again that's a lot more of a jokey thing than a really serious I've got to be the top player. We don't tend to have those players.
Yeah, I know Alan made a big point of them being the 9th best backgammon player on Board Game Arena at one point, but then they slipped down. But you mentioned that you have had other problems, and I don't want to bring down the tone so much, but can you talk about what problems you have seen and how you address them, and maybe how they could be avoided with hindsight, or if they could be avoided at all?
Okay, so we did have one player who put out some tweets. We had a weekend event, and he apparently, I don't do Twitter, so I was told about this secondhand, but he'd put out some tweets overnight about made some derogatory comments about one of the other players, and I was made aware of this, and immediately then spoke to that player and explained that why that wasn't acceptable, and he accepted that, and he apologized to the other player, and we sort of kept an eye on that. I was aware of it and kept an eye on that particular player.
Was it kind of like trash talk that had gone a step too far?
Yes. I mean, definitely gone too far. He then did something similar at another event that I was at but not organising, and he was thrown out of that event. And to be honest, he then went off and played other games after that. But we didn't really see him, which was not a great loss, to be honest. But I think you've got to. It's quite difficult to have to deal with. There are players who perhaps don't see eye to eye, and again, you've got to deal with that and make it an environment where they can play the game, and even if they don't like each other, because not everybody likes each other, but they can play
code of conduct.
Yes, there's a code. Actually, the Weird again have a document called Gaining Grounds, which is a set of guidelines for playing Malifaux tournaments, and then we can modify those and change those as we wish. So there's rules on what models you can use, which we tend to be a bit more flexible on, but there's clear guidelines on what's acceptable. Some of it is difficult to administer because you if you're not there, when something's said or there's a certain situation,
of like the anti-bullying, anti-harassment stuff.
And clearly we deal directly with that. Where it's other situation where it's he said, she said, what, then that's a bit more difficult to deal with, and you have to manage it as the situation arises. Obviously, sort of abusive play or abusive language or inappropriate language, then we'll deal with straight away. And that's one of the difficult things. I think some of the guys who run tournaments it's very easy to say, I'll run a tournament, but until you've run one, you don't realize how difficult it is, and all the things that you need to consider. And some guys will go, I wouldn't run another tournament. Okay, fair enough. It doesn't suit everybody. I quite enjoy them, and you have some difficult things that you have to do, and they take a lot of effort. But
Sure.
at the end of the day, I'm doing it because I enjoy it, and I enjoy seeing people play, and I've met a lot of good people through organising tournaments.
And yeah, I think that's such a lovely thing, because I did want to make sure that we got into why do you do it, because I mean, I self-publish games, but it's the games that I've sold to other companies that actually make me any income. Frankly, arguably, if I cared to, if I stopped self-publishing entirely, I'd probably stop losing some of the money, if you know what I mean. But then all of that money, I value it so much. Like, it's allowed me to go to other conventions and, show it off to so many people and see people that are enjoying themselves. And, the stuff that I run, like the most serious tournament was when I said, okay, in a bind, it has been sold to Gigamic. This is going to be Yogi. This is going to be the last ever tournament of In a Bind in the world. There were enough people that we got like a special room just for us at UK Games Expo. A small room, it was like the size of this bedroom. There were like 2 tables and like maybe 15 people. It wasn't like, an entire hall. Like you have like maybe a third of that hall for one of the CCGs. But, that carried on for a couple of hours. It felt fairly serious, and people were enjoying it. But even that is miles away from the kind of more involved stuff that you might have to do for Malifaux tournaments. And of course, at a higher player count, there's going to be more and more interpersonal challenges to overcome. But it is such a joy to bring people together, to see people being excited to win, and to see people being so happy and having a good time. And that's why I do it. And I imagine it's the same for you by the sounds of it.
Yeah, it's great to see the comments when you put up about certainly the weekend tournaments and the nationals. Is people going, yeah, I'm coming because it's the best social weekend, gaming weekend that I have in the year. And that's great, because it means that the tournament is almost a side issue, and that should go smoothly and almost be seamless. And then it's about the going out for a meal in the evening, or going down the pub. We meet at the pub on the Friday nights before the event, because a lot of people are traveling and staying over. A lot of people come and help me set up the venue, because setting up 40-50 tables of terrain from an empty hall takes a lot of time. And that's quite a good atmosphere as well. Even just the setup, where people wander in, maybe have brought some terrain or just come in for a chat, and it's right, we'll go and set that table up there, and we have a chat and get ready for the event, and then down the pub for a beer and something to eat.
Yeah, it's such a lovely thing. And obviously, from the point of the publisher, I mean, I'm sure that Weird is like really happy to have people like you doing the work of sharing those things. And I do want to state, for anyone out there who may be watching in a place where I no longer am, like, I'm going to be leaving the UK in a few months, but so if you want to run some tournaments of some of my games, I can probably arrange some. Yeah, I would love to have it. I'm like, I don't have the fan base, and I know that, but that Malifaux does. But yeah, if WellyCon or some UK convention, if you wanted to run a thing over the course of an hour or two, kind of saying, hey, this is this thing, and because you get people talking about your game, the people who are playing the game are going to keep playing the game. And from a publisher's point of view, let's talk about cold, calculated marketing. Okay, I'm sorry to go this low, but it's about bringing in new players, bringing back the players who've like dropped, but like also getting people who are playing the game to keep playing the game, because it's about getting those people who are playing the game to keep enjoying the game, because that's why we make games. And then those people who are enjoying the game and going to tournaments, they're then going to tell their friends about it. And I think that's part of the reason why people say, "Oh, Bez, like, really, we've heard about you," or there's like a buzz at the stand where people do walk past. Oh shoot, the yeah, and I have a fan base maybe in Thailand. Like, I'll do a tournament, and when I go there, because that's where I'm going. But yeah, let's finish off by talking about what makes for a great tournament. And let's talk about what you prioritize, because Alan talks a little bit. Oops. Let me find a comment. Alan talks about, do you get many spectators? Because there's a balance, I believe, in making a tournament fun to play for people who are playing, actually finding the best person. Because let's be honest, if we were genuinely trying to find the best person, it would be a multi-day round robin affair. And, you know, tournaments would run a lot longer than they currently do. Sure, you could, you know, do some sorts of Swiss but even at the end of a typical tournament, you're not 100% sure that you found the best player in the room. But that's balanced against being enjoyable for the people playing and finishing in a timely manner and being something that they actually want to go to. And finally, yes, making it enjoyable and interesting for spectators, which I do have a bit of, in my mind, I want it to be fun for spectators. And so I say, okay, after we've played all these rounds, the top X players with the most points, and sometimes it's two, sometimes in a game that requires more people on the table, like Kitty Cataclysm, it might be four. They say, okay, we're all going to sit down, the top few players, and that will be the final, and then people enjoy it. And if it's in a convention setting, people will be intrigued and maybe have a good match to watch. So how do you balance these needs?
I think at the end of the day, the tournament is for the tournament players. That's what they've paid to come and do, and the tournament should be well organised and whatever. But in terms of the spectators, if you're playing in a store or you're playing at a convention or a show, then you will get people coming along. But one of the things we've done is we've set up an extra table. So if somebody wants to come and have a demo of the game, assuming you've got some time to do that, then you can introduce them to the game, or you can just talk to them about the game. So there's always going to be somebody there who's wandering around, keeping an eye on things, and they can talk to people. Most people, if you're in a store or at a show, then it's people who already know about gaming. And so generally you're talking about the environment, the setting, the style of play, the fact that we use cards instead of dice, that models are moved individually, not in groups, and the way that you score points maybe. Some of the bigger events are run at closed venues, so therefore an audience is not something you're going to get, apart from sometimes it's the guy who's running the venue coming and asking what the hell's going on, sort of thing. In terms of a good event, you should almost, I think that a good measure is, did you notice there was a tournament organizer? Because if it's been a really good event, you've turned up, you've registered, you've played some games, there's been some announcement of the results and surprises, and you've gone home again, and you haven't noticed the fact that there's somebody there running around dealing with the panics, dealing with his computer going wrong, or people being late, or people having queries, or a table not working, or a piece of terrain breaking, somebody losing a card or losing a model, the fact that there are prizes there, that the results are correct, all those sort of factors that come with experience. And I've got to remember I've not run a tournament now since February, when I go back to running tournaments again next year sometime. Is that all still in here? Because I rely on running tournaments to, the checklist is in my head. And so the next time I run a tournament, it's not just a case of throw some terrain in a car, pick up I've got a little toolbox which has got all my how to run a tournament stuff in it, like table numbers, which I thought was a good thing you remembered, and turning up at the venue. There is a lot that goes into it to make that seamless, and that's what makes an event a good event. I think I've got, I've had plenty of experience of how things go wrong, not just for me, but going to other people's events where they've got the results wrong because they wrote the result down wrong and didn't check anything. And got no record keeping system at all, to people not having enough terrain or having very poorly set out tables or no table numbers, or there's so many things that can go wrong. People not calling out time and then just going, oh, that's it, the end of the game, let's have your results. All that sort of thing all adds together, and some of it's experience, because you get better every event that you run.
I think you're right, and the focus has to be on the event rather than what's going on.
Has everybody had a good time? Is your number one consideration? That's what I want. I want people to go away and say, I had a good day today. It was worth it. It was worth the tenner that I paid, or whatever. I had a good game. I had 3 games. Maybe I didn't win many games, but I enjoyed it. I learned something, and people liked my models because I'd painted up something different. And people, it's just nice sometimes to be playing and somebody goes, wow, those models are really cool.
Just to say, to Xates, I was fiddling with a thing. I didn't realize I was going to demod you. And something went off in the chat. I pressed the wrong button. Or rather, I didn't know the results of that button, but I will change it after this show to make you moderator again. Sorry about that. Anyway, I think it's been a really nice chat. I think we've got 2 minutes to kind of chat about a side topic that I wanted to ask you. If you've got more than 2 people in a game, or more than 2 teams, do you think that it no longer becomes a viable tournament if you're trying to actually be serious about it?
Oh no, we play. There is a version of a variant of Malifaux called. It certainly used to be called Henchman Hardcore. I can't remember what they currently call it, and that's a multiplayer basically single model. You're playing with one figure, and if it dies, it comes back on again next turn. And we've played that with 3 or 4 tables of 6 players each, and the top players go onto a top table, and we've played that. We've played that quite successfully as an icebreaker, because it's a bit of fun, but you can certainly run that so you get a winner, and it's quite legitimate. And yes, you can. As you said, I think you mentioned before, and with a multiplayer game, you can get people teaming up to advantage or disadvantage other players, which isn't necessarily a bad thing if you're doing it in the right way. I think that the one you mentioned about all the cards going to somebody else and so that they won is perhaps a little extreme, but going up on someone who's running away with the victory to try and even the game up a bit, that's fine. I think it becomes more difficult to run as a serious event if you've got multiple players. I would imagine. I've not tried anything more serious than this, which I use as a Friday convention icebreaker, get people together who've not played before and just mix everybody up. Can't hear you.
Whoops, sorry. What I'm hearing is that there are all sorts of ways to run tournaments. whether you're doing it as an aspirational model, like what's he do for Magic the Gathering, where it's like, hey, these people are living a life just playing this game. You see, this game is super serious, and it's kind of legitimizing their game, which is a fair thing to do. And kudos to, I think it was, I forget the name of the person who sets it up. It was Richard's friend. Oh, yeah, Mons. Sorry, I can't remember. But yeah, setting up a pro tour definitely has a viable thing. Setting up a tournament to keep people that are already enjoying the game, allowing them to play the game in the manner that they choose, giving them those opportunities. Like, what is this tournament for? If you don't have a fan base, honestly, like when I did those tournaments at conventions, it started off with me having to get random strangers and say, hey, come and join this tournament. It's a super simple game. It's basically play it once, and then if you don't want to be part of the tournament, if you want to be part of the tournament, stick around. And we're going to play this and stick around and you might win something. That was basically a way to lure people in. It was a way to promote it. And as the years have gone on, it's gotten to the point where, yes, people will make a beeline for me at 2 p.m. because they know 2 p.m. Bez is doing something. And I managed to keep that timing. And like, I know at one convention, it was a very small convention, to be fair, maybe 100 people. And then I had maybe 15 people at my table playing this game, like more than 10% of the people at the convention, because everyone was like, yeah, we want to do this at this particular time. And yeah, it's all about, why are you doing this? Are you doing it to bring people together, to show off your thing, and most tournaments are going to be to facilitate more opportunities for playing, because it sounds like the prizes, all of those kinds of things, who cares at the end of the day?
For the events that I run, there are a lot of tournaments, I'm sure, that are there to find who's the best player on the day, and there will be some prize associated with that. I think, looking at the question, the least important thing is the spectators. It's important if you're trying to draw people, as you say, if you're using it as a promotional tool to promote the game at a convention or a show or something, then maybe that's slightly different. But certainly when most people are talking about tournaments,
I would agree.
Yeah.
Like, for me, that final part of it is because, let's be honest, if you know you're not going to win, how exciting is it to kind of take part in the game? And maybe some of those people, they might be a bit tired, especially if it's a physical thing. And if we say, okay, these are the 3 finalists, and they're going to have the final games, they're going to play 3 times, and until one of them wins twice, that's the way the final will go. Something as simple as that. If it's a 10-minute game, you can't just say, okay, let's keep playing until someone wins twice, because maximum it's going to be 4 games. That's not terrible. And people go around and they are like, okay, I got knocked out, but that person plays really well at my table, I'm going to support them, and little things like that. And to recap, to wrap up, we've talked about so much, and it's been a wonderful chat, so thank you very much. We've talked about killer bunnies and Malifaux and painting, and a bit about engineering. We talked about the social aspects of tournaments, which this has really made me realize, it's that how I was expecting Malifaux tournaments to be a lot more about who wins it, if you know what I mean, rather than just that social gathering. So that was really interesting to hear. But it is still about the spikes, using the Mark Rosewater terminology. It is still about the people who want to, improve themselves, who want to work to, engage with this game and try to make strategic things. Yes, you can have the painting competitions and side raffles, but it feels natural that it is going to go to, it is going to attract the more competitive sorts of folk. That's inevitable. You need to think about, okay, you see new folk, that you see new strategies being played. It's all about the game. It's about, and then logistically think about how you're keeping track of the scores, whether it's digital or paper based or on a blackboard. That I know that's a lot of Go tournaments do, like really old school. I mean, it makes sense for a 2,000-year-old game. About the space, about the people, about the timing, about the copies of the game or the terrain or whatever you need, about, you know, those table markings. Do you want to have prizes? Like, what it's really made me appreciate is those certificates, just like the value of just a certificate to say, hey, congratulations to you. And talking about the entry fee, because some things you pay an entry fee and some things you don't. And I know that I entered a digital tournament of Hive, I want to say, where there is no entry fee, but there's still a prize, which is because there is like a little bit, it was a very small prize. It was basically a sculpture or something, and it was being promoted obviously by Johnny Annie, who made Hive. But we've talked so much about it. Do you have anything to get the final word in? Is there anything else that you'd like to say?
No, I don't think so. I think there's a lot more things that we could have talked about. But I think we've covered the sort of the basics. Bearing in mind, I'm only talking about one particular environment, and it is a very productive and proactive environment. In this particular group, there are, you know, more competitive games than the Malifaux out there, and the atmosphere is probably quite different in those.
Yeah, absolutely. For the game, it's going to be different. And I want to say thank you to everyone. Thank you to everyone in chat. Sate, I think you should be a moderator. If you could try typing again, see if the mod badge comes up. It's weird, but let's say if you want to follow me, those are all my links. David, I don't believe you've got anywhere on the internet that you want to be followed. But I guess if you want to engage in Malifaux, then, you know, Malifaux, check it up. It's a nice game.
There's plenty of groups on Facebook, and the main one is called A Weird Place. So that's probably the main group, general group on Malifaux, and you can find me there.
So over to you. What are you up to? Share anything, only if you want to. So whether it's a trivial or important or just fun, for a couple of minutes, I am possibly going to see Chris just quickly to get a photograph taken. I need a new passport, which is going to be quite important because I am hoping to go to Leipzig in a few weeks' time. And so, yeah, hopefully I'll be able to get my application sent off on Monday and get it in 3 weeks after that. Other than that, I am looking forward to a somewhat relaxing day. Yeah, and I will have breakfast. I might have some chicken. Just heat it up. Some pre-prepared chicken. That's what I'm looking forward to. I might even play a solo game. How about you, David? What are you up to?
Well, this afternoon I've got to finish decorating the room that's going to be my work from home study. So I need another coat of paint on there, and then hopefully get back out of here. And I'm just looking for him. Get painting on my little Stompy robot.
Ooh, nice.
That's my next model to be painted.
And since I've been asked, it's almost expiring. And yeah, kitten cuddling, that sounds like a nice thing. And yep, I'll speak about that. I don't know what the international travel thing's going to be like, but I think if it's for work, which I could say it was, and people are saying, thank you, David, I should say, yeah, thank you again, everyone. And Xate is drawing with chocolate. And yes, thank you very much for being part of this show, David. It was lovely to hear from you. And now there is only one thing left to say, really, at this point. Ooh, Xate is finishing a Formula One race car, several cheetahs, and a computer with chocolates. That sounds cool. And the only thing left to do is to say bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, 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 bye. This is the goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye bye, everyone. Are you not saying bye?
Oh, sorry. Goodbye. Thanks for having me on.
And if you're in Twitch, then I'm going to suggest going to Piano Man Dom, who plays lovely music. Otherwise, if you're on YouTube or Facebook, this is the end of the show. So, bye-bye.